Now, inverse condemnation can apply in, there's two general categories. One would be what we call physical takings. In other words, a physical taking has occurred and you as a property owner have not been given the opportunity to make a just compensation claim. The physical taking that would seem most obvious, where they take part of your front yard and not go through the process, basically that rarely, if ever, happens. Where it's an obvious taking, where they physically take your property, it's very, very rare that the condemning authority will not institute proper eminent domain procedures. I will give you an example of the kind of a situation where they didn't, and the kind of a taking occurred where it was a physical type of a taking. I represented a commercial property owner. The commercial property owner had direct access to the major highway. The back of his property also had a narrow easement that went out to a side road, but it was very narrow. It was, I believe, only 12 or 15 feet wide, where his driveway going out to the main highway was 30, 35 feet. In other words, sufficient for the commercial operation. The condemning authority was changing this main highway and making it basically a restricted access highway. It had 4 lanes. It was designed like a freeway years earlier, but they had let property owners still have access to the highway. They were now, years later, coming along and basically closing off all of those driveways. With this particular property owner, they closed off the driveway, but because they saw that he had this easement that went out to a side road on the back of his property, they never instituted any condemnation proceedings. Now, the loss of an access is a physical taking. If you have an access to a property and it's taken from you, that's something that is taken from you. In this particular situation, this property owner did have access. The question was it reasonable access? And we claimed in that case that because the access that was left was only like 12 or 15 feet wide, it was not nearly the type of access wide enough to accommodate the commercial use that this property was zoned for. So in this particular situation, that property owner had us initiate an inverse condemnation action. We ended up going to trial, and the trial judge agreed that because the access that remained was so narrow and it was also obstructed by some holding tanks, that for those reasons the court decided and concluded that that was not a reasonable, adequate access in light of the access that had been cut off, and therefore the court held that the access that had been cut off amounted to a taking, entitling that property owner to a claim for just compensation.